We are here now. You are nicely, comfortably sitting in your seat, having an amazing day of TED Talks. Well, I am standing here in front of you, and I'm hoping to deliver upon the expectations that you have and share my ideas with you. But let's not talk about me too long, as that might not at all be that interesting. When we leave this room today and go back to our lives, we're concerned about our happiness, the happiness of the people around us, our well-being. But we only inhabit this planet for a small amount of time, and there will be a generation after us, and a generation after that, and a generation after that, and hopefully many more after that. Now imagine that you're born in one of the generations to come. Maybe you go to a TED Talk, but at least you will be concerned about your happiness and the happiness and well-being of the people around you. But in order to meet and realize your dreams, you would need a healthy planet to live on, fertile soil to grow your crops on, resources to make the products and goods that you desire. Wouldn't you have expected your ancestors in the previous generations to have provided this to you? Wouldn't you have expected them to preserve some of the resources for you? We are this previous generation to the generations to come. Don't you think that we have a responsibility to think about them every now and then? I do, and I'm convinced that in the way we're currently using the natural capital of this earth is unsustainable. So I've spent the past years looking for a way to have a high positive impact on the way we use and preserve the resources that are available to us. And during my search, I came to the conclusion that big impacts can be achieved by global multinational businesses because of their sheer size, their financial capabilities, and their global presence. So I started working in the area of supply chain sustainability. And when I started working there, this area is changing rapidly. It's transforming because of the application of smart, fast, and relatively cheap information technological solutions. Supply chain sustainability has to do with increasing the environmental, social, and economic performance of supply chains. And the objective is to arrive at and maintain a sustainable level of resource consumption. Now, supply chains are incredibly complex and global. And a supply chain is basically all the organizations and businesses that provide goods and services to a final customer at the top of the chain. And one way of looking at supply chains is in tiers. So tier 1 suppliers are the suppliers that provide goods and services directly to the customer. Tier 2 suppliers are the suppliers of tier 1 suppliers, and so on. Supply chains are incredibly complex, and one way to visualize it is with this picture, where the customer is as a red dot in the middle. They also change all the time. New suppliers may join, contracts may not be prolonged, and suppliers are lost. So it's in constant state of flux, you can say. And many of the businesses that I'm working with, they just about know their tier 1 suppliers. But whether they have the contact details of these people in order to talk to them, well, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And if you imagine that a global multinational business can have tens of thousands of tier 1 suppliers, from which it buys hundreds of thousands of products for hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, you're starting to see the size of this. Businesses need to work with their suppliers in order to make their supply chains more sustainable. And in order to do that, they need data. And getting this data is a big and massive exercise for them to do. One more thing about supply chains, and that is very important, because within supply chains, there is the responsibility principle at play, which is very easy. It's similar to you and me buying something from each other. So if I buy something from you, I'm partially responsible for the way that's being made and produced. Why is that? Because it can be argued that if I wouldn't have bought this from you, you wouldn't have made it in the first place, or those resources might have been preserved for future generations. Now, supply chains are transforming in 3 key ways. The first one is that there is now the ability to manage big data. The second one is that traceability becomes possible. And the third one is that new transparency and collaboration models emerge. And this is all because of the application of new software solutions and IT technologies. It's now about 2 years ago when I first spoke to Kate. And Kate is a supply chain sustainability manager at a global pharmaceutical business. And I remember very well that the first time I spoke with Kate, and to be honest, I was quite impressed. She said to me, Tom, listen, we know how to make our business more sustainable. We figured it all out. We know what to do. We know how to improve our plants and sites and manufacturing sites and so on. We know that. However, we've discovered that a big responsibility for what we do as a business lays within our supply chain. And actually, if we look at our annual carbon emissions, about 40% of our carbon emissions are coming from our supply chain. Now, here's the problem. We don't know who, we don't know which suppliers, we don't know how much by each supplier, we basically don't know anything about them. So we need to find out, we need to figure out. And this was just at the time that online sustainability platforms, smart data analysis tools, and aggregation tools, they became available. And we actually started working with Kate, and we started to ask the questions to about 2,000 suppliers. So what are your carbon emissions? What is your energy consumption? And we collected all this information for her, and her business, of course. And this wasn't possible in the past. Now technologies allowed the collection of data from thousands of business instantly in real time, and the aggregation, and it gave her key insight. Now, one of the interesting findings that this exercise gave us was that where it was previously assumed that in order to start doing something about this 40%, or for other companies it's a different percentage, but it's big, they needed to work with thousands and thousands of suppliers. It actually turned out that big impacts, that there are a small number of suppliers which are very big impact suppliers. And this gave them the insight and the tools to actually start working with these suppliers in order to make them more sustainable. A second transformation that's taking place is that traceability is becoming possible. And the word traceability already gives you some indication what it's about. The ability to trace back what a product is made from, and we've heard about that previously today. And it was actually funny because the other week I was sitting in a train and I was browsing through my phone, and I came across this article about the Greenpeace canned tuna shopping guide for 2015. And Greenpeace released it, and the article that said that surprisingly, for a large number of the tuna brands, the canned tuna brands, they couldn't trace back where the tuna, which they put in a can and then sold, they couldn't trace back where this tuna came from. But let's take a step back. Surprisingly? That's not surprisingly at all if you think about that a majority of businesses have no clue what's happening below their tier 1, and the tuna might be in tier 6 or 7 or whatever. And this is a problem, right? Because businesses can't trace back where their products come from. They can't inform us where it comes from, and we want to know. Legislation is developing that will ask them to know. Fortunately, new technologies allow this data to be collected. And one of the businesses I'm working with, which is a US retail and home furnishing store, they have said that we're going to source all our paper and all our wood material. We're going to source that responsibly. Now, this is the paper and wood supply chain. You can see how many different areas and different ways, and I think by now you understand the complexity. So they previously used to have an Excel spreadsheet with all kinds of questions on them. They would email it to their suppliers, and they would fill out the numbers and send it back to them. Or they would say to their suppliers, well, here you have the Excel spreadsheet, now you send it to your suppliers and start collecting this information for us. Didn't work. They had no clue who was doing what, where it was, and everything got lost, and by the time they got all the information back, it was already outdated. So we took that Excel spreadsheet, we put that in an online survey, which could be sent from the business to the tier 1, to the tier 2, to the tier 3, and so on, all the way to find out what paper mill, what wood mill, what saw mill the products came from, and whether this was being sourced sustainably. And this allowed them to have a continuous oversight of who to talk to, where the information was missing, where the risks are, and actually this allowed them to actually contact and go and visit suppliers in order to see, okay, that is sustainable or not, and what can we do in order to improve that. Now, during that process, when I was working with them, I got in touch with an artisan manufacturer in Indonesia. And it was a lovely lady, and I helped her complete the survey and find out the documentation that she needed. And at some point I asked her, and I said to her, so do you get a lot of these surveys, and is this happening more and more? And she said, yeah, well, actually, many more of my customers are asking these types of questions. So where did I buy my products from? And I said, so how does that impact your business? And she said, well, in the beginning, it was a big problem because I had to find out all this information I didn't know. But actually now, my customers are helping me and they're making me aware that actually it's very important to buy sustainable products. And this was very interesting because I was thinking, okay, in order to do something about sustainability, you need legislation. The governments need to tell the businesses what to do and what not to do. But actually, in big parts in the world, that's not possible. And it's now that because of customer pressures, that organizations all over the world are starting to change their business practice and become more sustainable. This brings me to a third and more fundamental shift, and that is that new transparency and collaboration models are emerging within the supply chain. Where businesses in the past were very protective about sharing any of this data, they are now starting to understand that they're all in the same boat. Everybody needs to do something about sustainability. And the protective mindset from let us deal with sustainability ourselves and please don't interfere is changing to an acknowledgement that they can't do it themselves and that they are looking to collaborate. And again, information technologies are enabling this change. Online collaboration platforms allow businesses to share the knowledge that is needed to implement projects on the ground. People start talking, they say, oh, that's good, we should do that. That product worked for us, oh, maybe you can do that as well. And they actually start talking to each other, and they can do that from anywhere on the globe, which is amazing. An actual impact is being achieved by collaboration models on the ground. Let me give you one example. It's an example of an energy reduction program, which is run by a business I'm working with. And they've said to their suppliers, you know what, we want to help you. Sign up online, give me some of your energy data. We have a look at it, and then we send a team of experts. We send that to one of your plants, your factories, and we're going to do an energy assessment. So we're going to figure out how your factory can save energy or use more renewable energy sources. And they go there for a week, and then they give some actual improvements that they can do to the supplier. Now that's great, because they pay everything for the supplier there already. But then they also say to the supplier, you know what, if you want to do this, we're going to pay for you to implement it. Now why would they do that? Because that can be millions that they're going to invest in a supplier. Well, for two reasons. First of all, they agree that they get back some of the monetary savings that they made with the energy savings. And second of all, they make their supplier more sustainable. They're acting upon the responsibility that they have. These new technologies, they're absolutely amazing. They enable and they accelerate the supply chain sustainability transformation that's taking place, and they're making businesses more sustainable all over the world. But technology is only one part of it, because technology is being used by people, and technology can only go so far. But it's people that actually make the change, and it's people with a drive in order to make a change that will actually continue this transformation. It's people like you and me, like us, who are going to work and going to start their sustainability journey. Because I've just started my sustainability journey, and like me, many businesses are just starting theirs. Now I invite you to start yours. And let me tell you one thing, if you decide to start your sustainability journey, I can promise you that's going to be a fulfilling one, because your goals are just. To say it in the words of one of the founding fathers of sustainability in the environmental movement, and a person who has had a big impact on me, what you get by achieving your goals is not as important as what you become by achieving your goals. Thank you very much.